Hi you guys! So today I'm actually doing a video I've been wanting to do forever, and that is my eyeshadow palette collection. I went through and counted how many I have, and I have 26 eyeshadow palettes. That's about half to a third of your average beauty YouTuber. I don't have a lot because I'm a lot. 26 palettes is a ton. Let's be honest. That is a ridiculous amount of eyeshadow palettes. I probably would not have that many if I didn't do YouTube. I would probably only have like 3 or 4 if I didn't do YouTube. But every single palette I bought for a purpose. And I use and I like every single palette. For the most part, I use every single palette I have. Some of them I just use as like reference or comparison, but I don't use them super frequently unless it's like Halloween or something. But I have a whole bunch of palettes to go through with you guys. And part of the problem is I am feeling super duper chatty today because so much has been going on, so much has been happening. My husband cracked his head on a steel door frame yesterday at work and managed to get 6 staples in his head. That was my Monday. So I'm feeling very like story time-y, but I want to focus on this. So if I drift off, I will try and pull myself back. I don't want this video to be super duper long. Also, no, I did not dye my hair blonde. I used the wrong shampoo this morning and it took all the pastel out. All of it. Like there's maybe a tiny hint of pinky peachy in there and that's it. So I'm going to have to redo my hair. Anyway, I was kind of struggling on how to divide up these palettes because I have so many, and then I decided to divide them into little palettes, standard size palettes, and then large palettes. So the little palettes are going to be like this size. The large palettes are these sizes, basically anything larger than your standard rectangular palette. And then I do not want to drop these. We have all your rectangular palettes. So I'm going to probably start with the big ones and then work my way down. Some of these are limited edition, some of these you can't get anymore, but I believe the majority of these you can still buy. And also, I wanted to share with you guys tomorrow, if I'm not super active on social media or anything, I'm taking my mom to get her first vaccination. I'm so happy she finally got an appointment and I get to take her tomorrow. I'm going to feel so relieved once she has that done, and then I will be able to focus on getting vaccinations for me and my husband when they open up for us in our state. If you follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you already know that, but I just wanted to share. See, I told you guys I'm in story time mode. Before I get into these, I do want to mention I have palettes from a large variety of companies. I have palettes that are cruelty-free. I have palettes that aren't cruelty-free. I have palettes that are collabs with people. I have all kinds of palettes here. I want to make this very clear. Just because I have a palette doesn't mean I support a specific person or a specific brand, or I believe in their ideals or what they do. None of that. I buy palettes strictly because of the product, because I want to test out the product or I like the colors. I do not buy products because of people. The only exception to that is the Pure and Raw Beauty Christy palette. I bought that because I love Christy. I think she's amazing and I wanted to support her. Also, that palette is incredible. And I would have bought it anyway because it's a fantastic palette. But before I got into this, I just wanted to make it very clear that I buy makeup products because of the quality of the product, not who makes it. just so you guys know. Now, I do try to make sure that the majority of my money goes to good companies with good ethics, things like that, you know, companies that do good in the world. But again, I also buy products based on, ooh, that's really pretty as well. So, disclaimer over. Let's get into this. First palette, starting with the big ones. We have the Too Faced Pumpkin Spice palette. This was gifted to me by my mom. None of these palettes have been cleaned, so if they're icky, I am very sorry, but most of these are in pretty good condition. I love this palette. This is beautiful. The formula is a little bit softer than the typical Too Faced formula. In my opinion, it's slightly softer than the chocolate bar palette. And it's very, very nice, especially if you like warm, peachy, pumpkin-y fall tones. It's a very nice palette to have. This next palette is actually the second palette I ever bought from a higher-end makeup company. The first one was an Urban Decay something something volume 4 palette with like butterflies that sprang out of it, like plastic butterflies. But I can't remember what it was called for the life of me. I still have the shadows for that, but they are broken down into individual pans and I never use them. So like individual pans, I'm not putting in this like individual shadows. I don't even use those, so I don't count that, honestly, as a palette anymore. But this is the Urban Decay Vice 2 palette, and I was so happy when this came out. These were the colors I was very into when I started doing makeup. Dark blues, dark purples, very dark, very metallic. I hardly ever use this palette anymore, unfortunately. I have not had a lot of luck with Urban Decay's metallic shadows. Now, their matte shadows are beautiful and there are some stunning colors in here, but their metallic shadows shed all over my face like nothing else does. You can tell if I'm wearing an Urban Decay shadow because you will see it on my eyes. You'll see it on my cheeks. You'll probably see it on my chin. You will probably see it on my clothes. No matter what primer I use, it goes everywhere. And that sucks because I love Urban Decay. Now, I will say some of their newer palettes, I don't know what they changed about the formula, but their metallics are so much better. But like in the old Vice palettes, I do not like the way those metallics wear. Okay, next one is Makeup Revolution, the Emily Edit, the Once palette. This was a collaboration and I bought it because it had some really pretty neutrals in it, and it had some really pretty purpley, pinky, and it had this peach, Laugh Cry. That is a beautiful, beautiful peach. And it had a mint color in here. To be honest, I don't use this very much. I used it a lot when it first came out, but I hardly ever use it anymore. Some of these are still really beautiful shades, and I do like the formula. Like Midwest is a gorgeous neutral for your crease, but I just don't pick up this palette a whole lot, and I think it's because there are so many shimmers in it and lots of the purples and the darker colors, and I don't tend to wear a lot of those lately. All right, next one is the Morphe and Jeffree Star palette. I don't know if you can get this one anymore or not, but I love this palette, you guys. It's beautiful. It's got pinks and greens, and it has this gorgeous stripe here that's all neutrals and all these peaches. If you like using a lot of color, this is a very nice palette, and I love the formulas in this. So it's really, really nice. I tend to use this one quite a lot, actually, because I do wear a lot of pinks and peaches. Next one is another Morphe palette. This is the largest one in my collection. This is the Morphe and James Charles palette. I think this palette is ridiculously huge. I think if you were going to buy this, I would buy the mini one because I will probably be 80 years old and still have not gone through this palette because it is gigantic. It has a great variety of primary colors, as a good mix of neutrals. I love all the neutrals here in the middle. Very, very nice, especially this shade right here in the middle, this peanut buttery color. I use that a ton. It's very, very nice. Again, just like other Morphe shadows, it's a very strong palette. Has a really nice formula, not too soft, not too chalky. Again, if you're looking for kind of a starter palette and you like a ton of color, this would be another good one. I will say that a lot of the Morphe shadows are pressed pigments though, and can be staining. If your skin is super sensitive to staining, I would stay away from both of those because they are primarily pressed pigment palettes rather than standard eyeshadows. Now let's move on to this giant stack of standard palettes. As you can see, this is like my favorite size of palette because I find that you get the most shadows in them. They're the most versatile and they're the easiest to travel with. I typically will pick 3 or 4 of these if I am going somewhere, which of course I have not been anywhere except my office, my living room, and the grocery store for the past year because I am trying to be a very good human. But when we are able to safely travel again, typically I will take 2 to 3 to 4 depending on where I'm going and what I'm doing. Typically of these standard size palettes with me because they fit very nicely in a suitcase or a backpack. They're very sturdy and they don't tend to break easily. Also, you can stack them all together and wrap a rubber band around them. That way they won't pop open. All right, so I'm just going to start at the top and go down. I tried to organize these by brand. First up, NYX Mystic Petals. This is just a standard shadow palette. And honestly, I'm not that impressed with this one. The colors were what drew me to it. I loved this shade and the metallics. They were beautiful, but it's patchy. No matter what I do with this palette, it's patchy and it breaks my heart. I will still occasionally use this to pair with other shadows, but I don't find this to be a wearable palette by itself due to the patchiness. However, the metallics look gorgeous on top of other shadows. Next is the NYX Love You So Mochi palette. I was so happy when this came out because I thought it was the cutest concept. However, these are difficult to wear because they are like a pressed cream. They're supposed to be like a cream to powder. Beautiful colors, like metallic, super duper shiny. But again, these tend to crease badly by themselves or with a primer. This is another one of those palettes that looks beautiful if you put it over something else. And I tend not to recommend palettes that have to be paired with other things and aren't wearable individually because, like, if you were just buying like an eyeshadow palette and it would be your main eyeshadow palette, I would never ever recommend this. But if you're pairing it with other palettes, it's a cute palette to have if you like the colors. All right, you guys, you know you have been around YouTube for a while when you recognize this palette. This is the Urban Decay Electric Palette. I freaked out when they came out with this. I was so happy. This is also when the concerns around pressed pigments and eye safety and staining and all that became like hugely important because this was like, I believe, one of the earliest pressed pigment palettes because you have these super duper bright, I'm like blinding you guys, I'm sorry. You have these super duper bright shades in here. These are beautiful, beautiful shades. They wear very nicely. However, again, this is not a standalone palette. Like you have Thrash here and you have Savage. These are also very dry, very chalky. You have to be careful with application. I mean, don't get me wrong, they are stunning. but I think the palette for what you got was overpriced. Only 10 shadows. I don't think it was done in a way to make it super wearable. And I think there are better bright shadow pressed pigment formulas out there now. I'm pretty sure you can't even get that anymore because it stained really bad. Like when I'm swatching stuff, I'm just rubbing my hand off onto a tissue and those colors stain my fingers that fast. So I typically only bring out the electric palette for like Halloween or if I'm doing a very specific look. And then I tend to stick to other palettes for my day-to-day bright shades. So you guys know I'm super duper picky about eyeshadows. It's the one thing that I recommend going high end on above all else. Buy drugstore foundation, buy drugstore mascara. 9 times out of 10, I will take a high-end palette over a drugstore palette, and that's because it's very, very hard to find good ones still, which is maddening. But probably one of the best drugstore palettes is oddly enough from L'Oreal, who I don't like a lot of their makeup products. The majority of L'Oreal's makeup products I've tried, I have not liked. However, they nailed it with these palettes. These are the La Palette Nudes. This is like the 1. They did a 1 and a 2, and I got the 1. And this is a beautiful neutral palette. Just nice, pretty shades. Excellent, excellent for everyday wear. And the formula is beautiful. It reminds me of the Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette in terms of formula. It's not super dry, but it's not super squishy like the Anastasia palette. Really, really good for beginners. If you aren't super comfortable with doing your makeup and you just want to pick up a palette to try, this is a beautiful palette. It's very hard to screw up a look with this palette. Next is another all neutrals palette, but this one is from Smashbox. This is the Smashbox Full Exposure palette. This is actually the only Smashbox palette I have, even though I have bought others to give as gifts, because I love this palette. It is beautiful. I know so many people had mixed reactions about this palette. Some people hated it. Some people said it was a disappointment. Some people said it wasn't pigmented enough. I completely disagree. This palette is gorgeous, especially if you want to do beautiful smoky eyes, natural looks. The pigmentation of these is beautiful. It's stunning, but it's also buildable. These don't go on super heavy at first. You can build them up. You can do softer looks with this. You can do more dramatic looks with this. This is an insanely versatile palette and has cool tones and warm tones in both shimmers and mattes. So if you don't tend to wear a lot of color, if you just want a very good everyday neutrals palette that also has the metallics for glamming it up, Christmas before last, this was my go-to palette for every holiday look I did, and it was stunning. Like it was my go-to Christmas look that year, and it was perfect. So I do love this palette a lot. Oh my gosh, I have a feeling this is going to be a super long video, you guys. I'm going to try and cut it down as much as possible. Next up, this palette is a mess, and that's because it's that weird material that was really popular for a while that's nearly impossible to clean. This is the Lorac Pro Palette 2, and I don't know, is Lorac even still doing palettes? I haven't heard anything from them lately at all, but I love this palette. This is one of the ones that I got again early into doing YouTube and getting into makeup. It has a whole row of mattes, a whole row of shimmers, has a ton of neutrals, and that had a plum, a navy, a jade, a black, so you could do like smoky eyes and stuff. I use this as my daily palette forever. You can see I hit pan on beige, barely, and this peach shade Nectar. I hit pan on that as well, and a lot of these are very, very deeply welled because I use this as my daily wear palette for almost like a full year. This was a very, very nice palette. I don't even know if you can find this anymore. You may be able to find it on like crazy good sale. Again, if you like neutrals, this is a nice palette. Would I buy it now? I don't think so, because there are other neutrals palettes I like a lot more. Another one that falls in the exact same category to me as I bought it then, but I probably would not repurchase it, is the IT Cosmetics Naturally Pretty Celebration Palette. This was a holiday release, I believe. Yes, it was a holiday release. And I remember the big selling point on this was every single shade in this is matte. It has nearly identical shades to the Lorac Pro palette, except every single shade is matte. And then you got this Transforming Radiance ribbon. Basically, you got a champagne to a gold shimmer shadow that you can layer on top of any one of these to make them look metallic. Didn't work super well, to be honest. I typically wore the mattes and then used this as a highlight, but this is a very nice selection of mattes. The shadows are a really interesting formula though. They're not super creamy, but they're not super hard. They almost feel like velvety. Very interesting formula. Very well pigmented though. So I think because this was a holiday release and it came out like years ago, you can't get it anymore. But that was a very nice palette. I will occasionally use that, especially if I need to pair a matte with another palette. Like say I'm using something like the NYX Brights palette, then I will pop out with this one for some neutrals to blend in with those brights. All right, next one is the Urban Decay Naked Reloaded palette. I know there was a ton of talk when this one came out. I did not have any of the original Urban Decay Naked palettes. I think they came out with like 1, 2, and 3, I think. I didn't have any of those. So when this came out, I was like, you know what, I'll get it. And this is a very good palette. I do like it. I believe that there are too many shimmers in it. For my taste, there are too many shimmers. I don't use a lot of them. I typically will stick with like these 4 and then these 3. So I love the retro shade in here though, this peach. It's beautiful. If you want just a nice, clean, pure peach shade, that is amazing. Would I rebuy this? Probably not, but it's a really, really nice palette, especially if you don't have a ton of neutrals or you really, really like metallics. But it's so similar to so many other palettes, it probably won't be something I would get again. Another Urban Decay one, this is the Urban Decay Naked Heat one. I thought the packaging for this one was really cool. And then the colors, I love the colors because I loved the warmth in them. I do wish they had done like more peaches in this. It looked like there were more peaches, but they really weren't. But there are some beautiful shades in here, like they're Scorched. I love Sauced. It's a very pretty neutral. And then Fuego is really nice too, especially for fall. If you like warmer, like wine tones for fall, this is a really, really pretty palette. That's mainly what I bought it for, was just for using in like September, October, November. Again, I haven't been pulling that one out very frequently, partly because it's spring and partly because I have a lot of those shades, again, in other palettes. I am happy to see palettes trending toward more versatility in their shades or doing smaller palettes rather than giant ones like these where there's a ton of shades but they are all very, very similar. Let's move on. I know this is a really long video, so if you're hanging in with me, I really appreciate it. Next up, we are on to the Anastasia palettes. This is probably one of my favorite companies to buy palettes from because of how good the formula is. I know for a fact, correction, I know they had that one palette where the formula sucked and they remade it and fixed the formula. I can't remember. I did not buy that palette, but their formulas are incredible. I know if I buy an Anastasia palette, the formulas are going to be amazing. The first one is the Norvina palette, which I had to buy because it is primarily pinks and purples. If you have green eyes, you know the magic that pink and purple eyeshadow can work. And this one is beautiful. This is one of my favorite palettes. The top row is all shimmers and metallics. The bottom row is all matte. I use these a ton. These are actually really unique shades, especially Soul. It's this beautiful, beautiful, like periwinkle, but like a deeper periwinkle shade. It's so pretty. That one and Wild Child, the super metallic pale pink, are probably two of my favorite shades in the palette. For some reason, my Apple Watch keeps thinking I am talking to her. We shall not say her name. But anyway, I would highly recommend it. I believe this palette is still available. If it is, and you like pinks and purples, and it also has some really nice neutrals in it too, with like incense. That's a gorgeous color. Then I would highly recommend picking this one up. This is probably one of my favorite palettes, like ever, 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 if you like pinks and purples. Next one is a classic. This is the Modern Renaissance palette. Mine is like trashed. I mean, even like the middle area here is all wavy. Like this palette has been through some things. This palette has gone on 2 trips to Chicago with me. Like this one is a guarantee. If I am traveling, I have this palette with me because I know I can always make a look out of this that will look really, really pretty. All these are based off of classic Renaissance paintings and the colors from them. Again, if you don't like pinks and reds, this may not be the palette for you, but it does have a lot of oranges. It's got more goldeny tone. It's got a dark brown and an orange. Just another really, really pretty palette. This one is also stunning for fall. Next one is the Soft Glam palette. This one is also, again, very, very nice. It tends towards the warm tones again. Most of the Anastasia palettes tend to go towards warmer tones, which I like because I find that cool tones can be really, really tricky on how they look on a variety of skin tones, while warmer tones tend to look better on a larger variety of skin tones. And this one's really pretty, especially if you like oranges and neutrals, like orange soda, burnt orange, sienna, rustic. Those are all gorgeous colors. Now, I will say that they do tend to occasionally repeat shades in Anastasia palettes. Like Cypress Umber is in this palette, and it's in the Modern Renaissance palette. So that's one thing you have to keep in mind is a lot of these palettes will have very similar or repeating shades. If you love those shades, that's not a huge issue, but if you don't use them very often, they can kind of go wasted. So one way I like to figure it out is I will take the price of the palette, divide it by the number of shades, so you figure out what each individual eyeshadow pan costs, and then take out that from it and be like, okay, do I have problems spending $3 on a shadow I'm not going to use when I've got all the rest of these shadows that I am going to use? If you're not going to use like half the palette or a third of the palette, then don't spend money on it. If there's only one shade out of it you're not going to use, but you're going to love the rest, then the palette's probably worth it. All right, the last Anastasia palette I have is the Riviera one. I love this one. I love the design of it. I love the packaging. I will say that the packaging does start looking really rough after a while because it is a canvas. It's not like you can clean it very easily. And this one is bright. Like, this is one of the brightest Anastasia palettes, but it's beautiful. Probably some of my favorite shades are, if I'm doing a neutral look, I will use Estate, Coastline, and Monte Carlo, because in my world, pink is a neutral. But if I want something brighter, Seychelles is stunning. This is probably one of the prettiest metallic teals I've ever seen. And I also love Mediterranean. Like, it looks purpley, but then it's more of a periwinkle shade. It's so nice. It's one thing I love is, yes, you will get fallout from these, but Anastasia probably has one of the creamiest eyeshadow formulations I've ever tried. If you want a metallic that is going to pop on your eye, they are the way to go. All right, I have two more mid-sized palettes left. These are both from Too Faced. I have the original chocolate bar palette, and when I mean original, I mean like the thick one. The one when the packaging was still gigantic. Yeah, I have the original chocolate bar palette. It still smells like cocoa powder. I've had this thing forever. I can't even remember when this came out, but it still smells like cocoa powder, and I still use this palette. This is an excellent neutrals palette. I love the shades in here. I like the formulation. It's very, very dry. If you like dry, more chalky shadows, this is more of that style of shadow. Again, very pigmented. I wouldn't say chalky. That's probably not the best description, but they're not like creamy like the Anastasia ones are. They're more of a dry formulation, but they still go on beautifully. This is excellent for neutral eye looks. It's one of those palettes that I would recommend as a gift palette if you want to gift someone makeup, unless I know that person super, super well. If I'm gifting makeup, then I'm probably gifting it to someone who already doesn't have a large collection or a collection at all. So I like giving them a very neutral palette that they can use in a variety of situations. One more, this is the Too Faced Chocolate Gold palette. This was gifted to me by my mom. I don't use this one super often just because it's almost all metallics. The only mattes in here are Rollin' in Dough, So Bougie, Cocoa Truffle, and Decadent, and everything else is metallics. So again, this is one of those palettes that you can do a full look with, which I do appreciate, because it's got a bone color, a black, and 2 shades of brown, so it's really easy to do a full look with this. But at the same time, if you're not into experimenting with your makeup, these are super bright metallics, like glowy level bright metallics. They are gorgeous. They are stunning, stunning shadows. And they are beautiful, especially around the holidays or when you want to do something very dramatic. But this isn't something that I would buy if you don't have any other palettes, because this definitely isn't a daily wear palette. It's more of a special occasion type item. All right, we are on to my teensy tiny palettes. Not teensy tiny, but you know, smaller palettes. Like, they're about the size of your hand. First up is the Pure and Raw Beauty Christie palette. You can't get this anymore. It was limited edition, which really, really sucks. I think that Pure should have made it part of their permanent collection because it is a gorgeous palette. First of all, it's very personalized. It's beautiful. I love the packaging. I also love that it's double-sided. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate things like double-sided palettes or things that are designed to be functional and versatile, and things that are different in the makeup industry. Things that are different from your standard rectangular palette. I love stuff like this. So this palette has 2 sides. You have your neutral side, which includes a beautiful bright peach. And then you flip it over, you have mirrors on both sides, which is amazing. And then you have your brights. I've used both the neutrals and the bright side of this multiple times. This is a stunning palette. It's got a beautiful peanut buttery shade. It's got a nice like muted pink. It's just so beautiful. And I didn't think I would use Camelot a lot, that yellow. It's so perfectly mustardy that I actually use that a ton. I reach for this palette way more than I thought I would, and that makes me super impressed. I really can't tell whether I love a palette until I've had it for quite a while, because I know whether it gets shoved in a drawer or whether I'm using it constantly. This is one of those that I use constantly. Speaking of palettes I shove in drawers, this one. This is the Tarte Make Believe in Yourself Eye and Cheek palette. This came out, I think, when they did like the unicorn line, Unicorn Mermaids, one of those lines. I don't know. It's when everyone was on like a sparkly kick. I bought this one. I thought it was really pretty. The packaging is stunning. It's gorgeous. However, none of these actually look like what they look like in the palette. And they're all like muted pastels. They're really pretty, but they're muted metallic pastels. And I never, ever, ever find myself reaching for these. It's one of those palettes that I'm like, maybe the color I want is in that palette. I reach for the palette, I swatch, and the color I think I'm getting was not the color I was actually getting. It looks slightly different, and I'm like, well, that's not going to work. So back in the drawer it goes. I have maybe used this 3 or 4 times since I got it. It's one of those palettes I regret buying. I don't have a lot of those because I'm very specific when I buy palettes, and this was just kind of a last minute impulse purchase, and I don't use it very often. Maybe I will this spring. Maybe I'll break into it a little bit and see what I can do with it, but yeah, she doesn't get used very much, which is a shame because it's round, it's different, it's pretty, and it's from Tarte, which is an excellent company. They make beautiful products. Next up, I have one of my go-to palettes. This is the NYX Ultimate Brights palette. My review of this is probably one of my most viewed videos on my channel. I love this palette. I think if you're looking for a basic bright eyeshadow palette, this is fantastic. These are pigmented, they're easy to blend, they're not so pigmented that you're going to like look like a cartoon character the second you dip a brush into them. They're buildable, they're very nice shades, very Easter eggy colors. So pretty. I use this palette a lot, especially this area, the pinks and peaches and like this teal. I didn't swatch this teal for you guys. Look at that. That is gorgeous. It is very hard. Most people don't realize how hard it is to make matte pastel shadows. Matte pastel brights is incredibly difficult to get the formula right on. Like, it's very hard to find palettes that do those and do them correctly, which is why I'm just in love with this palette, because the formulation is on point. It's just perfect. All right, we only have 3 palettes left, you guys. I have 2 ColourPop palettes here. I have the ColourPop Soul palette. This is one of their 9pan palettes, and this is kind of some neutral browns and peaches. Peaches, oranges, really pretty shades. So if you like peaches, I would recommend this one a lot. I believe this is still available. I can't remember. I think so, though. And the Mar palette. This one is, again, more natural browns and coppers. And then you've got these really pretty teal shades. These are gorgeous. Now, I will say the shades in this palette are a bit rougher. They feel a bit gritty when you're swatching them, but they still go on the eye beautifully. I would recommend for the metallics in this palette, though, definitely you're going to get better color payoff if you use your finger to apply them over a brush. And then for my very last palette, This is my newest one. This little teensy tiny cutie is La Belle of the Ball. This is from the ColourPop and Animal Crossing palette. You guys, I started playing Animal Crossing again, and I got Nintendo Online so I could do custom paths, and that was the end of it. Like, my whole island is getting like redone at this point, and it's looking so freaking cute. Everything's like pink and purple, and I'm doing a cafe, and I'm going a little bit crazy. I'm playing Animal Crossing way too much right now. So this one is a 4-pan palette. It has Able Sisters, which is a not eye safe glitter, or not approved for use in the eye area glitter, I should specify, but it's gorgeous. It's so pretty. I actually wore that as a highlight one day, and it was so nice. That has 3 other purple shades. Again, if you don't like purple tones, this is clearly not the palette for you. But if you like purples and you can find this anywhere, it is really, really cute. The quality is really good. And I love, love, love this purple pastel with a little bit of sparkly glitter in it. It's so cute. I've been very into things that are cute and bright lately, trying to change up my house a little bit, get rid of some of our older, darker furniture and brighten everything up. Mind you, I just bought 2 dark gray couches, but I'm covering them in super bright pillows and blankets and stuff, trying to kind of brighten everything around me and make my environment just as happy as possible. Anyway, you guys, that is all 26 of my eyeshadow palettes. If you've made it this far in the video, I'm seriously impressed because, to be completely honest, I am terrified to sit down and edit this video, and I have to start on it right after I'm done filming this because I'm not going to have the time tomorrow, and tomorrow is Wednesday, and this video is going up on Wednesday. Hopefully, if I can get it edited, because it's over an hour now. So hopefully I will have this like closer to half an hour or 40 minutes. Hopefully closer to half an hour by the time I get done editing. Anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please, if nothing else, give me a thumbs up for the amount of hours I'm going to spend over the next 2 days editing this video. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can also keep up with me on Twitter and Instagram, and all the links for those are down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. And I will see you guys again very, very soon. Bye.